Welcome to the Hotel Tech Podcast. This is the show where we tackle your most pressing issues to bring your business more wins. Keeping up with technology is challenging. Our experts are here to help you figure it all out. Here's your hosts, Glenn Haussman and Estella Hale.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Hotel Tech Podcast. I'm Glenn Haussman, and I am here with my co-host, Estella Hale, and she's the Chief Product Evangelist with SHR, and of course, that stands for Scepter Hospitality Resources. And as you know, she's one of the top tech minds in our incredible industry, and I gotta be honest, I'm a little shocked that she's actually allowing herself to talk to a guy like me. Estella, how are you today?
I am doing great, and I love talking on shows with you, Glenn, because you make it exciting on every topic.
I know. I will tell you. Sure, we've only done one episode of this series so far, but I am loving each and every minute of it, and I'm learning so much from you and the great guests that we have on the show each and every week. And Estella, let me tell you, I really learned a lot from last week's show, all on direct bookings and how it's not really cheaper than indirect bookings. You two really explain the topic a lot, and I think everyone should take a good listen to that.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be valuable for everyone. We feel it is information that everyone can bring back and then grab insights and nuggets for their operations and their revenue. So, yeah.
And speaking of great insight, I think we're going to need some more of your magic today, Estella, because we're going to be talking all about integrations. And over my career in the business, over 20 plus years, it seems to have been a major, major headache. So I'm curious as to what you think about the state of integration right now and why most hotels fall short on their intent when it comes to integrated technologies. How do you see this thing working out so far?
Well, I think integrations have come a long way, and they're great from a perspective of cutting manual resources, but there is still pain. It's still painful, and it still bothers us, but I think we should let that bother us a little bit. I think that it's good for us. I think that is how we advance creating standards. That is how we advance the communication of data within systems in the industry. However, we should never use this as an excuse to delay adoption of those standards or let bigger players set the rules. I think the fact that we should let this bother us a little bit should bring us to the point of saying who it is that we're serving with this integration, who it is that we're aiming to please, and that is the guest. And that is why looking at serving that guest and looking at how that integration plays a part on it is how we can best relate and serve the hoteliers.
Oh, that's interesting to me because I never really thought of integration as a great way to service the guest. I always saw it as a great way just to make hotels operate more efficiently and therefore lower the expenses. But I think what you're telling me is by when you have great integrations, it could actually satisfy the guests and help make hotels make more money through maybe higher revenues.
Absolutely. And extending that service. So think of integrations. Yes, integrations from a code and a message perspective. It is about data. It is about flowing the data. But the way the guest interfaces with us has changed. The concept of walk-ins that we had in the hotel industry before has now evolved to really somebody in your parking lot making a reservation on their mobile device so they walk in with a reservation. And integration, a true real-time integration, plays a role there. So by the time that guest confirms the reservation in your parking lot and walks into your front desk, they are expected. So you are still serving that guest by making them feel expected, making them feel welcome, and integrations played a part on it.
Excellent. Now, before we bring in our awesome guest today, I'm curious as to where do you think we are in the state of integrations? Because from me as a non-tech head, it feels like we've moved along pretty well, especially as emerging technologies seem to be simplifying it, or maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I agree. In the past, specifications for systems to talk to each other were very unique. And it was the case where the bigger players were setting the rules. But when we have moved to these web-based application, really in every aspect of our jobs, it has allowed the standardization somewhat, but the standardization of how we communicate. But at the end, the intention of all of us that are technologists, the intentions of our perspective are only proven valuable when they meet those real world operations. We could not tackle this topic without a hotelier's perspective.
Well, I'll tell you what then. Let's get ourselves a little hotelier perspective. How great timing is that? And I love the transition. Let's bring in Mr. Kevin Duncan, and he's the VP of Revenue Management with Classic Hotels and Resorts. He also happens to be president-elect of the HSMAI Arizona chapter, so that's pretty exciting. And serving in his position, he's responsible for providing overall revenue management leadership and strategic guidance for all properties, which help lead to increased profitability and RevPAR for Classic Hotels and Resorts. Kevin, sir, how are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
So I really appreciate that you're here to talk with Estella and myself today all about this particular topic. I'm curious as to how do you see the state of integrations today?
From my perspective, I see the state of integrations being confusing and chaotic at times. There are several integrations that when we sit back and look at it from a hotel perspective that we really have to dial in on. And it doesn't start from step one with how that reservation is coming or where it's coming from. To Estella's point, it is actually driving that integration all the way through the guest staying on property and departing or leaving the property as well. How are we communicating with that guest when they're on property? Is it through an app of some sort that is integrated into a property management system? Is it through text to talk? What does that look like with that consumer, and how are we really welcoming them, but also pleasing them and hitting their touch points that are important to them along the way? There's a lot of integrations that we consider here at Classic Hotels as we go through acquisitions or even in our current state. We have hotels that have been with us for years, and upgrading those systems, it takes a lot of consideration on what needs to integrate with that system from an operation standpoint to a service level standpoint as well.
So how do you approach all of this?
One step at a time. We attempt to do it with all the key players in the room. We try to ensure that obviously there's an IT person, a real tech geek, as I like to say, who can understand how systems speak to each other to help make some of these decisions. We pull in the key players such as revenue management, the general manager, food and beverage operations, VP of sales and marketing, and even marketing to really help us understand, what are those key critical components that we need to keep in mind as we're setting ourselves up for success on the technical side. One of the key learnings that I've had over the year is that technology is growing at such a rapid pace, and some of our senior leadership tend to be on the older side. They're not old, they're just on the older side. So they need to be educated along the way on how technology is working. And so we take time to really not make the decision for the team, but to make sure that we're educating the team along the way to why we're making that decision, and they can understand how integrations and how different services or systems work within each other.
I completely agree with Kevin, and I think that also happens on the system side when newer entrants might have newer technologies, and legacy systems might have, of course, a more legacy type of architecture, but yet they have more depth than the newer entrants. So, we see this both on the operational side and bringing that knowledge to the different departments that need it. But then we see it, like Kevin was saying, bringing multiple players to the table as we're talking to these integrations to see what is possible and how to mesh, how to work with those newer entrants with newer technologies and legacy systems that have really in-depth functionality for some of the hotels, and what does that allow us to do? So it's interesting that it happens both on the system side and on the people side.
So that's really fascinating to me, what you're implying there. So it seems to me that over time the PMS has become the one that has to bear all of that weight. But I'm also hearing and listening now and understanding that APIs are starting to change that kind of world. How are both of you seeing that take place right now?
I agree, Glenn. We now live in a world of APIs, and several of our industry associations have tackled the task of creating standards. We have standards from the Open Travel Alliance, we have standards from HTNG, and now we also have content APIs for major channels. However, having these standards is really just a guide. Technologies companies can pick and choose which messages to support. So I am with Kevin that it is still fairly complex. And I do also agree with the perspective that PMS carries a big part of it because it is the operation system of the hotel. But now, as you see that convergence of revenue management systems really guiding the pricing for a hotel strategy, and the guest recognition, loyalty, CRM aspect guiding some of that pricing as well, I think the lines will blur a little bit more from it traditionally being so heavily on the PMS side and expanding where that guest profile is, for example, touching all the way from the revenue management system into what is offered and into how that guest is engaged with once they're on property. Or what do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Estella. It's interesting. Over the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to sit on several different conversations when it comes to what to do with that guest data, but also how to translate that guest data. So from a revenue management perspective, we want to know that consumer from day one, from when they really hit our website. We want to try and know and identify where has that consumer been in the past, what do they enjoy, what are their passions, what do they tend to buy, that kind of information, and ideally be able to throw a rate, for lack of a better term, to that consumer with that's going to touch all of their key points of their passion and really trying to get that closure. The other interesting piece too is when you look at the PMS is the heart of the systems, right? That's the main frame, but we're starting to see some of that change, to your point as well, Estella, where all of these integrations can actually house a lot of data. And one of the interesting conversations that I had last year at High Tech, in fact, and I think it was part of a meeting there, was hotels and hoteliers are starting to look at their data and where is all of that consumer data going. And PMS systems, they can house a good portion of it, but they can't house all of it at times. And so a lot of hoteliers and companies are really looking to create their own data warehouse. And so there's an integration that's got to go to a data warehouse to where we can then take all of that consumer information and break it apart and use it to our best advantage, whether it's for marketing, how to sell to a person, how to really go after what that consumer wants. It creates a different playing field for us moving forward when it comes to that kind of data.
Okay, so what you're talking about then is, yes, I know the topic of today's show is about integration, but you're also implying that the entire customer journey is really becoming a critical component for you to understand how they really want to stay while they're on site at one of your hotels, such as the Arizona Grand Resort and Spa or the Scott Resort and Spa, for example, and then be able to cater opportunities to them that'll get them to spend more money, which I guess makes a lot of sense since you're in charge of generating that revenue.
That's correct. Absolutely. That's the ultimate goal. How do you get them to empty their pockets?
Right. So then what are you thinking about in terms of, integrations in order to make it so that your systems run as smoothly as possible so you can connect with the customer in a more organic way and ways that are more meaningful to them that gets them to spend more money?
Yeah, what we are looking at is what is that CRM system, that consumer system that can track all that data. There's a lot of companies out there that has that information because they can tap into social media aspect from a consumer buy. They can tap into Amex spend on a consumer or an account, which pulls that information into it as well. We look at currently and in the past, the best way to do it was to look at who's been there. So who is that current consumer or the previous consumer, and how are we going after and targeting them, where the change is slowly migrating and taking place to actually, we know who our consumer was, but do we know who that consumer is? And I think that's where integrations are playing a big difference in understanding who that consumer is right now, looking at our website and how do we attract them moving forward. So it comes from a CRM piece in order to do that. But the CRM, speaking of the entire topic with integrations, your CRM has to be able to integrate into an RMS, and the RMS into a PMS, and then all of that into a CRS, of course, in order for that consumer to make a purchase.
Yeah, and even beyond the integration, Kevin, I really liked what you mentioned about visualizing the data. So I agree that just for the fact that technology has evolved and it has allowed really anybody to be able to hold massive amounts of information in a much more affordable way that it was in the past. Now, it is something that is achievable. It is something that more from a hotel company, from a technologist perspective, is like, okay, now we can hold on to that data in an affordable way. But how do we visualize that? How can we then take that and create value? Maybe from a hotel group or chain perspective, that creating that data warehouse and using it in that form is one way of visualizing. Another one is really creating that revenue generation platform that includes a piece of the CRM management, a piece of the revenue management to create those details offering. But having this view of where we want to go with it, I think it is a great thing, because that is how we advanced on the availability rates and inventory communication that we have today for what you think of volatile data. So, in the past, that integration of that volatile data, availability rates and inventory with the different channels, the failure of messages was higher. But with the growth of online bookings, with the growth of OTAs, with the growth of, again, guests having a shorter and shorter booking window before they show up in your front desk, we had to make the interfaces better. We had to make the communication where it had a very, very small failure rate for that ARI volatile data piece. We want to get the right rate in the right channel for the right guest so they can show up and everything is seamless for them. So if we were able to do that, because the industry and the guest took us there by their shifting their patterns of buying online, I think it is a great foresight that we see now, moving from it just being a PMS and distribution system centric to extending from the time you forecast your rates to how you sell them to how you serve them to that guest. So it's really that intersection of revenue management, central reservation, and customer relationship management. And I think we can get there.
I think you make a great point too. So, Kevin, I got to ask you, how do you see these different stages of the booking journey relating to integration and helping you be more successful in your business as a hotelier?
Yeah, see the different booking stages currently, and where I think it can go. The process itself with the consumer, I don't think we'll see a change. I think that kind of stays static. Where I think the difference is for me on my part, from a revenue manager standpoint, is the price offerings that are being given. It's a different philosophy at times. Current state is Estella touched upon it. We set our rates based on different criteria, but demand, our competitors' rate, etc. But once we set those rates are given out to the consumer, and it's given out to every consumer that's shopping on our website at that time. Where I believe with integrations and the data that we can potentially get, where it changes is that we know that consumer that's looking at us. Glenn, for an example, you may be looking at us and I may be looking at the same dates, but two different rates will come out, because we're going to know your preferences and we're going to know my preferences, and there may be a difference between the two. I know that you probably like to stay in the executive suite everywhere you go, Glenn, so we're going to offer out the executive suite.
I like to roll that way. I'm VIP all the way,
So we're going to understand that,
yeah.
and we're going to offer out the executive suite to you right from the get-go versus offering out a room type that just doesn't interest you. And I think that's where the difference of the consumer shopping stages will change. It's the same buying process, but the offering that's being given is going to be different in the future.
And do you feel that that's going to, aside from enhancing revenues, do you think that's going to make people more likely to click to book if they're exposed to just offers and opportunities that are geared towards their past behavior and how you perceive them to behave in a consumer way?
Yeah, I think it depends on the consumer. Truthfully, if it's a leisure consumer that doesn't travel as often, obviously we won't have as much data. So the offerings may be a little different. It may be more of an experience for that consumer going through the shopping process, where a business traveler that's on the road all the time, or a good portion of time, they know what they want. They know exactly where they want to stay. They know as they're going through that process. So I think the click to book, essentially, hopefully it shortens that for them, where from a leisure consumer, that's part of the experience. They want to do that site tour online and then understand where they're going and really understand what they're purchasing. And so it creates a different story for them as they're going through the process.
And as you're thinking of these stories, as Kevin mentions, I think integrations still plays a role. So think of these different paths, whether it's a known user or an anonymous user. For a known user, the integration probably on identifying them could be with a CRM. For an anonymous user, the integration could be with the website itself. Did they just spend 2 minutes reading a description about a particular room type? How can I integrate that into the booking path so that room shows up first, for example? So again, shifting the expectation of what integrations bring hoteliers, and shifting it from it's going to reduce my manual processes to it's going to help me connect with my guest is what really brings us to this vision of how can it solve the biggest pain.
So, Kevin, what's your biggest pain that you hope to get solved with technology and integration and what I hear about Open API?
I'd say loaded question. I think my biggest pain is really understanding all of the changes that are taking place. It's a fast-flowing environment right now, and it's funny that we're recording this podcast, or we're doing this podcast a week before High Tech. I had my first experience at High Tech last year, and thankfully I had a schedule and I knew what I was doing and where I wanted to go and who I wanted to meet with. But if I went to high tech without that, I would be lost in integration and systems environment that I don't think I could ever come out of. So really, I think the biggest pain for me is just how to process or progress through all of these changes, and knowing that we may buy this system today, well, a year down the road, there's going to be their competitor that's going to have an even better system because technology is changing so fast in this environment.
All right, so let me ask you this, Kevin. How do you manage your hotel content, for example? And would an integration with the CRS bring something, more successes to a hotel? Or do some integrations not really matter as much as others because of the way that, you're talking to them via content, like on your website versus an OTA, for example?
Managing our hotel content, it is very important. And we do use a CRS that translates or portrays a lot of who we are with our hotels. There's a lot of data that goes into that CRS from a content standpoint, photography, videos, descriptions, you name it, that consumer, once they hit our booking engine, they need to know what they're purchasing. So a lot of our content is actually managed through our current CRS with Scepter, even more so than what we put on our website at times, depending on the path that consumer is looking at or going down. So that's essentially how we manage our content. The integration of a CRS with a CRM, we feel, can be very advantageous. It allows us to view that pre-buy phase, the shopping phase, as I like to call it, with that consumer. And then as that consumer purchases and moves through and actually stays with us, then we can compare what did they look at on the CRS or the booking engine platform, what did they end up buying, and how could we tackle that or sell differently to that consumer in a forward-thinking phase.
That is correct. On the one side, you have the richness of content that you can handle on the CRS that provides the ability to display it in many channels, even more than just the website, because you have different mediums and they even those have different character limitations. So having one place to manage content is something that hotels, I believe, need today in order to keep up with the different content demands that they have. There's additional content demands out there that the hoteliers keep an eye on, which is that user-generated content that their guests are posting. And that is something that, of course, they control through the experience of itself of the guest staying and what they are posting. But they do not have as much control as what they themselves publish through a CRS. So to have a system that publishes seamlessly and in real time that hotel content is very important. And going back to the point of the integration with CRS and CRM, I believe that is the stepping stone of that revenue generation platform, because when you create that bridge, it is as if your website is an extension of the segmentation that you will do for providing someone a price. So you're really taking these steps of narrowing the segmentation based on the information that you know on that guest with the CRM to almost make it that personalized offer. And it depends how much those integrations allow that a hotel or a hotel group, how far they can take it. But again, with that end in mind, you go from overall segmentation of market, traditionally that all hotels must do, comparing with their competitor, etc. But then go down the path as much as your integrations allow to create that value offering for the guest that seeks that content on your website.
Well, as a guest, I definitely want things to appeal specifically to me, and I guess as a hotel use, Kevin, you want to make sure that the guests are spending more money, and interfaces and APIs are a great way to make sure that happens. Kevin, any final thoughts that you might have, and anything that we've missed that you want to share?
What's interesting is, and we didn't touch upon it yet, is how this can affect direct booking process versus an OTA process. And then for us as a revenue management discipline, that's something that we monitor very closely, and what are those channels? Where are our bookings coming from? And I think that some of these integrations can be a game changer for property direct bookings to increase because that consumer is going to get a different feel and a different experience than a meta search type shop on an OTA.
So, Kevin, what's the panacea for you, and how long, if ever, do you think it'll take until we could achieve that?
I think that it's going to consistently be ongoing. I don't think there's ever an end date. The OTAs have a lot of technology as well that they may hold close to their chest and not share. I think that they have a lot in their works in really pleasing that consumer as well, and finding that consumer to move them over to their site. So I hate to say it's not a battle, right? It's a good competition on who can come to the game or to the playing field faster and quicker, and we're both doing it at the same time. It's just a different way of doing business.
I foresee a shift on some of the aspects within the systems that the hoteliers use today. I foresee a shift on profiles that traditionally have been handled by PMS to be handled either if a hotel uses a CRM or from a CRS perspective, building those up further and building either the communication with the website itself to identify that anonymous user, or with an external CRM or an internal CRM that the CRS provides, and really the shifting of that profile to create more personalized offers.
Excellent. Well, I think we've learned an awful lot today from Kevin and Estella. So, Kevin, before we wrap up today, this is my favorite part of the show, giving you an opportunity to give a shameless plug for you, your hotel company, Classic Hotels, whatever it might be. Maybe even your favorite thing on Netflix. What do you want to plug today?
I'm always a fan of Netflix, and I'm waiting for Ozark season 2 to come out if it does. So.
Well, usually, fortunately, the way Netflix works is they usually do 2-season orders at a time. So I think you're going to be in luck for that. But hopefully you won't have to wait too long. Perfect.
Classic Hotels and Resorts. So we are a growing company. We're a luxury boutique independent company as well. We manage 6 properties throughout the United States. 2 of them you mentioned on the show here in Arizona, the Arizona Grand Resort, and then our sister property, the Scott Resort and Spa. We have 2 in the beautiful village of Carmel, California. La Playa Carmel, which is the Grand Dame of Carmel, is a old mansion, actually, a lot of history. Back in the Ghirardelli family that was created. The mansion was created back in 1900s. So it's an older historic hotel, beautiful place. And then a smaller, newer property, the Hotel Carmel. And then move up the coast, or down the coast, I should say, to Southern California. We have 2 properties right in Laguna Beach. One of them, in fact, sits on Main Beach in Laguna Beach. So it's a fun company to work for. I have no issues in traveling for them. The locations that we have are spectacular. So keep your sights out, because we're a growing hotel company for sure.
All right, so now you got to get them to work on building a place in the Ozarks so you could watch the Ozark show in the Ozarks. I think that's what you've got to get coming your way. So thanks so much for being here today, Kevin. It was really great learning and laughing with you today. And, Estella, I got to ask you, what are you going to take away from today's show?
One of the things that us, and I believe those of us that are dedicated to providing technology to hotels, is that key point that Kevin made. It is still all very confusing. So as we see industry-wide associations trying to tackle the complexity of creating standards. I think us embracing what exists and pushing forward to see what helps hotels connect with their guest, I think is just having that commitment to working with each other and not just allowing whether it's the bigger players to set the rules or what works best for our system, but whatever works best for that hotel to connect to their guest.
Excellent. And I think that's a perfect place to leave it today. I couldn't have said it any better than Estella, so I'm not even going to try. So thanks for listening to our show today, and make sure you sign up to get each and every show, and you can find this on SHR's website, which is shr.global, or also on the No Vacancy News Network. Find that at novacancynews.com or anywhere you like to download your podcast. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all those guys, you can subscribe to the feed and get our show. Stick around, because soon we're going to have more great episodes on topics such as loyalty and technology, mobile apps, the future of predictive marketing, and much, much more. We look forward to you enjoying future episodes of the Hotel Tech Podcast. For Estella Hale and myself, thanks for listening.